Hi, I'm Danny Halbom. Welcome to my studio. Today we're going to do a painting of mine called Gift from the Sea. We're going to have a background that's soft, blending down into the sand. Then we're going to show you how to do the streaks across the water tops. And then we're going to lay in a wave, show you how to do foam on the wave. And then the second day we'll come back in and do the foam on the sand itself, as well as the rose. And then we'll take a little bit more time and we'll put in a shadow on that rose. I'll show you how to use Payne's Gray for that. Okay, so here's the paints that we're using. We're using burnt umber, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, a little bit of yellow ochre, some lemon yellow, viridian green, Prussian blue, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, regular lamp black, and Payne's Gray, as well as some from Elba white. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to mix up some of our Prussian blue. The Prussian blue is real strong, so you don't need a whole lot of it to get a nice tint. A little bit more white. You want to make sure you have enough paint so you don't run out. When you're mixing a certain tint, like we're going to be mixing here, if you run out and you have to remix, it's going to be a totally different color. Okay, maybe a little bit more, because we got a lot of that sky up there. And we'll darken that down just a little bit more of that. Okay. Now let's mix in a little bit of cerulean. Lighter. This we're going to use primarily for the foam. Okay. Now let's mix up some ultramarine. A bit of burnt umber. Make that a little bit darker. Okay, now let's mix in a little bit raw sienna. Grab the last one. We'll do mix up here is some of this viridian green. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to grab our 2-inch brush, we're going to grab some liquid, and we're going to coat the painting just lightly. Not a whole lot of liquid. You just want to give it just so it's a little bit wet. Otherwise, when you're putting on your paint on this dry canvas right here, it'll be very hard to move that paint. And we're going to be blending softly from one tone to the other. So we need a little bit wet background here just to give us some smoothness when we're blending. Just keep grabbing that liquid and putting it on here. Now again, you don't want too much liquid. You don't want it solid. You want it just so it's a little slippery when you touch it. Just enough so when the paint goes down on the canvas, it's not grabbing the canvas, it's moving across the surface of it rather than grabbing that background. And coat the whole canvas up here. Like I say, you don't want too much of that on there. You don't want it real wet. You just want to keep it so it's not that dry surface that you have when you start off with canvas. Okay, once we have that down, and what we're going to do, we're going to grab some white, just straight white. And now because we have the liquid that's down there, we don't need to grab more liquid with the paint. We just go straight on with the paint. And if it gets a little dry, you can grab a little more liquid, but for the most part, it should be just straight paint on top of the liquid we already have down, and that'll smooth that fine. Okay, so I'm going to grab a little bit more liquid. All right, now next thing we're going to grab, the next one we're going to grab here is we're going to grab some of this ultramarine blue that we put down, and we're just going to make like a circle right around where we're going to put in our sun coming through. And if you need to, grab a little bit of liquid if it's a little too dry. Depends on how much liquid you put down. And we're just going to go around that circle there a little bit more. Okay, now once you get that put in all the way around the white area that you've got there, and you got it pretty well even, same color, tonal wise, all the way around it. Then take your brush, wipe off some of the excess paint that you have, and then just start moving it toward the center of the circle. That'll give us a head start for smoothing. Once we start smoothing, this will give us a head start. We won't have to fight so much to get it to blend from one color or one shade to the other. Just like that. Okay, now the next color we're going to get is some of this Prussian blue. Again, a little bit of liquid. If it feels dry, you can feel it on your paintbrush. If it's a little too dry, you'll feel it, and you just need to get a little bit more liquid. right about here, I think is where we want to break that at. Maybe a little bit higher. Let's go a little bit higher. You don't like to cut paintings in half on the top. So we'll bring that blue up to there. So, now you can see how wet and watery that is. I put too much liquid onto the paint, which is not a problem, but just so that I notice it, it's like, okay, this is too wet. So now I'm going to move up here to get some of the paintbrush off. Now when I come back in, I don't grab any more liquid, just straight paint. And hit that same part that was dry. And now you can feel it starting to feel like it's supposed to. Right. Grab a little bit more. We're doing the same thing. We're going to go right around that circle. Grab some over here. Now it feels a little dry, so I'm grabbing a little bit more liquid. Just one more shot here of that blue. Okay, then like before, dry your brush off a little bit so you don't have too much of that paint on. And now just come back in and start knocking this back into the last shade that we had. And this is just giving us a head start from blending. We're going to smooth all this out. Get a little bit on top here too. We're going to smooth all this out with the big brush as soon as we're done laying down our colors. But we want to get a head start so we won't have to do too much with that big brush for smoothing out. Okay. Just give it some kind of a head start. Try not to get into the center because we got a darker blue here. If that darker blue goes into the center, you're going to have a problem trying to blend it out. You're going to have to actually take that out with a paper towel, put some more white in, and go back over it again. So when you're going back and forth, just stay right on the edge here. And just move in a little bit at a time if you want to, just to give it a head start. But you don't want to get right into the middle of that. And then just move yourself right back out. So you can see we're just getting a head start on our blending. Now we're going to have the beach color come down here, and our wave is going to probably sit right about here, maybe a little bit higher. So we might want to bring a little bit more blue down because we're going to have some water down here. So let's hit just one more time with that blue. That's the Prussian blue that we're using. And we're just going to hit it one more time. That's looking pretty good. Okay, now you can keep that. You don't have to clean your brush off at this point because we're going to mix all these colors together. We're going to blend it out smooth. So a little bit of the blue paint that's on your brush, try to get most of it off, but don't worry about cleaning it off to get, the next color we're going to be grabbing some of the brown. Don't worry about just grabbing the brown right off the bat real clean because we are going to be mixing it. So a little blue into the brown is not a problem at this point, right up here. Down here we want it pretty well brown, but we're going to start mixing up here. So get some of that paint off, but don't worry about cleaning it with your turpentine. Now the next color we want to grab here is the sienna, burnt sienna, and we're going to come right into this area here. Now again, if it feels too dry, where you can see that it's too dry, grab a little bit of liquid. And again, not too much. You can always come back and grab more. But if you get too much liquid like we had up here, then you got to add more paint and you got to fight that. So let's just grab some of this. And again, just so you can see how it's grabbing some of the blue so it's not that straight color that's on there, and that's fine. because we're going to be blending all this anyhow. And then just kind of give it a head start up in here into the blue. Again, don't get too high up here because we want some of that. We don't want any of this brown in the sky. We're just blending the ground right at this point. Okay, now the next thing we're going to grab is the burnt umber. And we're going to go right up to the edge on the burnt umber. Now again, because we still have some of this color onto the brush, I'm starting right where I'm blending rather than starting over in this corner and bringing it up. So I have some of this color that's on the brush with the burnt sienna, so I'm mixing it here. We're going to mix it anyhow, that's fine. Okay, so we're grabbing some more of our brown here and just go right along the edges here. More liquid. And a little bit more of that brown. Okay. Now again, make sure you don't go up too high. Your best bet is to lay it down and leave a gap if you have to. And then come back and mix, put all that brown down in here. Okay, all the way out to the end. Okay, now try to just go back and forth to get an even tone, even if it's real dark down here. And now because it is dark and we don't want to get blending it up too much, now that we've got a pretty good head start on here, now clean your brush out pretty good. Again, you don't need to use the paint thinner at this point. Just clean it out with a paper towel, or like I'm using a regular towel, just to get the majority of that paint off the brush, because we are still going to be blending, so you don't have to be clean. Okay, now that we got most of it off, now come back in and just start grabbing it, just like we did up in here. And just start grabbing it over there. A little bit of blue comes back in there, that's fine, we're mixing it back and forth anyhow. So just go back and forth. Like I said, we're just getting a head start here. Now go up, and that's about as high as you want to go with that brown. If it gets too much, you might want to get some more blue to knock back in here. We don't want to go any higher than there. Okay. Okay. All right, now we got it pretty much laid in. Now the next thing we're going to do is take our big 3-inch brush. Make sure that it's damp, dry, that it's not wet. If you happen to clean it off with paint thinner, clean it off really good and make sure that it's dry, not wet. Because if it's wet, when you start trying to smooth out, you'll actually be taking the paint off of the canvas. So make sure that it's clean but dry. Okay, now again, always work from your lightest source down to your darkest source. So what we're going to do is we're going to blend in here, get this well pretty much blended, clean the brush out a little bit, then go down. Just like we started laying the paint down, we're just going to do the same thing, only we're blending with this brush now instead of laying paint down. So start in with your white and just cut it back and forth. Now when I'm doing that, I'm going real soft. I'm not hitting it real hard. I'm just going real soft with it. I just want to lightly move the paint one color to another on top of the canvas. So that's why I'm hitting it real soft. As we get into further and further back, then you can hit a little bit harder. And again, you want to work around that center, that circle. Okay, you start feeling that there's a lot of paint onto your brush. Then again, dry it off a little bit, not with the paint thinner, just dry it off with a paper towel or a towel, and then come back in and hit it again. So we get a nice smooth blending, almost like airbrush. Okay, now we can start moving a little bit into the darker areas. Now that we got that lighter areas kind of blended out smooth. Again, you want to work around that circle all the way down. Now also you'll notice as I'm smoothing out, you'll see me going sometimes this way, sometimes that way, back and forth. That's the best way to get the smoothest transition of, again, like an airbrush effect, going from one color to another. Is you start moving it this way, and when you're hitting it that way, if you go back and forth almost like an X pattern, it'll just start smoothing out perfectly smooth all the way across it. And again, not too hard, you're just moving paint on top of that surface, just back and forth until it blends into one color. You're not really taking it off. So again, just go one way, then go the other way, and then come back this way again, just back and forth, and you'll start getting a perfect blendation of color right across the canvas. Okay. Again, if you see some area like this is blending out really nice, but this has got a really dark and then it goes really light, you want it more blended. Again, just clean off your brush a little bit and just keep hitting it back and forth. Just stay in one area. The more you stay in one area, the more you start knocking it back. Okay, then clean your brush off. Now we're going to start blending it down this way. And again, just start in from your blue, and we're just grabbing a little bit. We're only blending here. We're not going all the way down and all the way back. Otherwise, we'd be grabbing that brown, throwing it up here, and that'll defeat the purpose. We just want to work our way all the way down that canvas. And again, go back and forth, crisscross to get it blended as smooth as you possibly can. Okay, and once we got it pretty well smoothed out, normally if we were just doing a sky, I would leave it like this, going from one area right down into the other shade of blue, and then start throwing in the clouds. However, because we're doing a beach scene here, we're going to have sky and beach. The beach that we're on is, of course, horizontal. So what we're going to do, once we got everything blended pretty smooth, now we're going to just go back and forth this way and blend it up being horizontal rather than circular, because we do have horizon as well as land right here. So now that we have that a good head start on that, now just go back and forth and just work your way up to that blue. Just all the way up. And again, don't go up too high. We want, because our water, we're going to have our wave here, and some of that water is going to be here, and we're going to start getting into the beach area. But we don't want beach all the way up here. So make sure none of this brown is getting up any further past than about here. And we want to go just back and forth. You might go a little bit back and forth. See, I'm not doing real big X's like I did with the circle. I'm giving it just a little bit and a little bit here, because I want to get it mostly going this way, blending, but I don't want streaks going across here. So as we're doing it this way, instead of just going straight up and down, I might give a little bit of a crisscross to get a real smooth blend going up. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. All right, and clean off your brush. Okay, so now the next brush we're going to use is this 3-inch rat brush. And I've showed you earlier in the video on here this rat brush, and I showed you how to make your own rat brush, the smaller ones. It's the same way, only it's a bigger brush. And the reason we're using this is we're going to be putting light shining on the water in the distance back there. And this is great for that. You can use a smaller one if you want, but I generally like to go bigger. That way there I'm covering a large area. I can always knock out what I don't have. But if you have a small one, then you've got to lay it in, you've got to lay in a second one. So I'll show you how to use that. Grab a little bit of liquid, and I mean just a little bit. You don't want much here. You want it mostly dry, if anything. And then grab some of your white. Now we don't want globs of white that's on there. We don't want it real thick, because if you have a real thick glob on here, to try to knock that back, you'll be fighting it all day long. You want to grab white paint on the tip, and not all the way down through the whole brush. You just want it on the very edge here. And just keep knocking it back. After a while you get a feel for it, but you want it to where it's just thicker on the ends, and that's about it. And fairly dry, because our painting is already mixed with liquid, so it has a wet surface. We don't need it real wet. I put a little bit of liquid on it just so that, because the brush is really dry. Okay, now we're going to come back in, and what we're going to do is our sun, we're having like a sun that's in a hazy background. Our sun's center is right about in the center of the painting here. So when we start laying down those streaks along the horizon, we want to go right in the center. You want to hit that, pull it down, and then just pull it right off the canvas until it just fades out. Come back in. Important, clean your brush off. If you come back with white now, some of that blue we picked up as we dragged will be mixed with that, and you'll have a light shade of blue instead of white here. We want a pure white here. So again, clean your brush off, not with the turpentine, just get it clean, pretty well cleaned off. Grab a little bit of liquid, again, very little. Some more of that white. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. Just play it back and forth on, like I'm doing over here, until you feel that the paint is on the ends and it's not real thick. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. We dragged it from here. Now we're going to drag it this way. So we take our brush, line it right up onto the center here. Even going over a little bit is better than having a gap. You don't want a gap there. So go over, instead of hitting it right at this edge, move it over this way from here to there. So we're going to hit it from here, and now we're just going to drag it right out to the end over here too. Okay. Now we've got a head start of like light shining on the water like a glitter. Okay. Clean your brush off a little bit. You can actually put in the paint thinner and clean that off. We are done with that brush. And now we're going to take our smoothing brush, our 3-inch regular house brush. Again, make sure it's pretty well cleaned off, not with the turpentine because we don't want it wet, but get a lot of that paint off the tip over here where we just did all the blending. So a paper towel or a regular towel, just get it pretty good and dry. Now because we want this smoothed out, and this is like, it's going to be representing like small waves back there in the distance. Because that is, our lines are going to be going this way, nothing going up and down. So our first hit is we want to try to smooth everything off this way, back and forth. Nothing going up and down, and not the crisscross at this time. So you just want to grab that, and very lightly, you just want to grab that and just knock it back, clean off a little bit of that, come back here. And again, just knocking it back real lightly. You can see how it's starting to take shape already. Okay. Okay. Now, once we have that pretty much blended out like this, don't keep hitting it, because the more you hit that, the more you're going to lose that sharpness to that detail. It'll start blending out. However, we do want these ends to blend out. See where you can see these streaks here? We don't want that. We want it to shine just to be in the center. So now, as we're coming back here, we're seeing, okay, we got thick area here, and of course that one over there. Now we just come back in. Now we start blending that back. And you can see what's happening. It's actually disappearing. And I'm not hitting it hard. It's just I'm staying in one area, and that's what's getting rid of it. And now we do the same thing on this side. Just hit that one area over there, maybe drag it a little bit more if you want, and just hit it back, just so we just have the shine in the middle. We want it to fade out to nothing on the ends, just like it was on a foggy day, like the rest of the sun is showing. Okay. Now, if you want to, let's go one more step here. Take the 3/4 inch brush. What we're going to do is we're going to define a couple of waves, because when you're looking at waves, like in the distance here, that looks fine, but up close they should be further and further apart. Waves, if it's the regular waves that are just on a surface, the closer you are to the wave, the bigger the wave is. The further away, then it gets smaller and smaller. That's perspective. Grab a little bit of the Prussian blue that we have here. And what we're going to do, and we don't want much because we're just going to blend it back and forth. Just grab some of that, and I would start on the outside over here. And then just come in, and we're just grabbing that a little bit and just let it fade out. Okay. Actually, I would move a little bit of white with that. We're getting a little dark there. We don't want it that dark right off the bat. So again, just take your paint, just make a wave up in there. And just let it fade right out into the canvas there. Now the same thing over here. I want to grab some of that and just fade it right into the paint that we've got going there. A little bit like I'm taking some of the paint off. Don't worry, because we're going to knock this back anyhow. Now come up here and do another one. And let's grab it right. Let's grab this one right here. Okay, same thing. Let's fade it out. Okay. And just go right off the canvas. Maybe we'll do one more. Okay, one more. Now give it a little bit more of a break and a little bit bigger wave. Right out to the end. Okay, maybe want to hit that a little bit darker this time. Okay. Okay, now we've got some kind of a break going. Again, go back with your 3-inch brush, because we're going to be smoothing this out. Make sure that it's cleaned off. We don't want any paint on there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take it and we're just going to go back and forth like we did the other one, and a little bit up and down. Just a little bit, because it's a little bit closer. Not too much, or you start getting it all squished in. You want some definition, but you want to get it smooth out to the end. Now again, once we get out to the ends, now we can start grabbing that, pushing it over, and back and forth to get it to blend out into nothing out here. Same thing over here, grab that. And just keep playing with it until you get exactly what you want on there. Okay, so now we've got like waves and way out from the distance. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to lay in our main wave up here. So to do that, let's grab our palette knife, and we're going to use some of this green, and we're going to use darker Prussian blue. So grab some of the Prussian blue you already have, mix some more Prussian blue into that mixture of white and Prussian to get it on a dark side. This has got to be, you want this darker than the green that's there. So that should be pretty good. Okay. Okay, grab your 3/4 inch flat brush. Let's grab some of this Viridian green. And now we're going to put in our wave. And so we're going to come in, let's just say we go up here, make a waveform over there. We're going to have the white coming down here, so we come down a little bit, and then up over in this area here. Just give us an outline. Okay, grab some more of that green, and we're going to come in just on the top part of what we already drew in. Not going to come all the way down, just on the top surface of it. Now grab some of your dark blue here, and we're going to finish off the bottom. And I'm going to come in just about like that. Again, if it starts feeling a little dry, grab a little bit of liquid and a little bit of that. You don't want it too wet, but you don't want it real dry where it's starting to rub on you as you're putting the paint down. Just like once we got that pretty well laid down, while we still have some of this dark blue on our brush, let's grab a little bit of the corners and darken them down. So most of the green is up here in the middle. It goes from green to the dark blue, from green to dark blue. So just grab a little bit of that blue. Don't grab any more paint, but the paint that you already have down here, just that little bit, just start grabbing some of that green. Just like that. Okay, the same thing on this side. Grab some of that blue and come in over on the surface. Just start blending it in. Okay, once you've got that down, now let's get a head start in blending here. Just like we had a head start going from the blue to the white, we're going to go from the green to the blue. So again, just start going back and forth and just grab a little bit of that. Make sure you don't want to go all the way up to the top. You don't want that blue. You want to keep some of that green. You want to mix it right into this area here. So just grab a little bit of that, move it around, just kind of getting a head start on the blending that we're going to need. Now let's take our big brush again, and now we're going to blend. And when we're starting to blend, we're blending from the green down to the blue. We don't want to blend any of this lighter blue into here. We don't want this to be soft. We want it soft from here down and probably down in this area. So when you're blending, try not to get the brush past that edge. I'll show you what I mean. When we're grabbing it, just grab a little bit of that and just bring it down. See how I'm grabbing that? You just, see now it's starting to blend really nice, and I'm not interfering with that top edge of the water. Okay. And clean your brush off every now and then. And just same thing with this area. All the way across. Okay, once we have that, now let's grab this blue and start knocking it down into this water here. Not too much, but a little bit. Just kind of follow what I'm doing. Just grab a little bit and just knock it down. You don't want to completely smooth out like we did with this blending here, but you want to knock some of that down. Okay, once we've got that, now we're going to smooth the whole area out nice and smooth. And again, get your brush dry, no paint on the end of it, and we're going to be going back and forth. But be careful not to get too much of this back. You don't want any of this color be blending in here and lose that hard edge. And again, I'm hitting it just real soft, just to get it smoothed out in this one area. Okay, now let's take our rat brush. Grab a little bit of liquid, and not much, just a little bit. And we're going to grab some of this ultramarine blue that's here. And we want to get a good amount on there. We don't want it real globby, but we want to get some amount on there. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're just going to draw the outline of where we want this wave to be breaking, the white foam on the wave. So we're just going to draw a little outline. And with that, we're just going to use the very tip of it, not the whole brush here. We don't want a big chunk, because we're going to draw just a thin outline, and then we'll start filling it in as we go along. So let's say we want the wave to be breaking up here, and then come down to this area. Again, a little more liquid maybe. And down here. Come up here. Actually, let's break that right down. Let's go right down with that. Let's go right down to the ground here. Okay. Now we've got a wave breaking really far, and we're going to come right back up. We're just drawing the outline right now. We see what we got, what we want. All right, let's come up here. Let's come down that way. Okay, we want the wave to break there. And come up here. And let's give a little more break over in this area, just the grins. And we'll come back up, and we just get a little break up here. Again, all we're doing is just really giving an outline. You don't need to go all the way across the whole thing. Give a break every now and then, maybe a little bit more over here. Just something like that. Okay, so now we've got the foam, the form of how we want the wave to go. This was going to be all white foam in here, and some white foam over in that area. Now take your 3/4 inch brush again. You want it a little bit wet, Because what we're going to do is we're going to take this green off. Okay, we don't want a green foam on here. So we're going to, this is our wave. Now we're going to come up in here. We're going to take some of that off. You may want to leave just a little bit, say on this side here. Let's just leave a little bit up here where we can bring some foam down into it. But for this part, let's just take pretty much all that water off of there. Okay, and the reason that we're cutting into this now, you're saying, well, why didn't you just cut into it before? It can get confusing if you just have your green and your blue and your green and you're trying to throw in your white. This way here we're drawing in, this is our wave. And now we're putting in our foam, and then we just take this out. It just makes it a little bit more clear thinking of exactly the direction that we want to go in. So let's take some of this out here. And you don't have to get all of that out, but you want a good majority of it. Okay, so we got a pretty good head start. We're leaving this green here because we're going to have some of that wave breaking, so we actually see that water, so we're going to need to see that color. So now let's grab our rat brush again. Let's grab a little bit of that liquid. Okay, now grab some more of this ultramarine blue. And now, when we're painting this, you don't, with the rat brush, you don't paint like a normal paintbrush. In other words, we're not going to be painting it on. What you're going to be doing is we're actually going to be pushing this brush. So when we're painting it, instead of painting it like this, we're actually going to be pushing that brush. And what that does, all the bristles that are all ratted up, they actually make little abstracts that are up there, which is natural to foam actually breaking on a wave. Let's grab some more of that. We'll come all the way up to the top. And then just start laying that foam in. Now again, you don't want to get too thick on here. You want to lay the paint down, but you don't want to get too thick because we're going to be smoothing this down, and that will be really hard to do with a big blob. Again, come down here. Okay. All right, and let's grab a little bit more here. Okay, the next thing we want to do now is grab our smoothing brush. We want to smooth this foam down before we put the highlights on the foam. Now again, because our wave is breaking this way, and this one is breaking that way, and this is actually just going to be flipping up, you want to move your brush in the direction that the foam is going. That way that it'll, when you start smoothing some of this out, or little areas that were flickering out here, when you knock them back, it'll go in the right direction as the wave actually breaking, and it'll look real. So for this one here, because we're breaking this way, we're going to be taking it, and again, very lightly, we don't want to hit this heavy, is we're just going to be knocking it back in a circular motion like that, just knocking that, just like the wave was actually breaking that way. And again, just hit it real lightly. If you got to come back to it, but just go lightly at first and lighter until you get what you want. Okay, we just want to get a general feel of where we're going here. Okay, for this one, because the wave's breaking that way and this one's breaking this way, we're going to go the other way. So now we just want to take this, we just want to knock it back just a little bit like this. And I'm going to smooth that end down just a little bit. Okay. And again, just real lightly, you just want to knock that, make that smooth. Okay. Now let's come back in with our rat brush again, only this time we're going to grab the highlights. So we're going to grab straight white. A little bit of liquid, not much. Okay, so now we're just going to hit the top part. We're not going to hit the whole white part, just where the sun would be shining down, hitting the top part of that foam. So we're just going to grab it, and I'm just dabbing at it. And again, I'm pushing it, I'm not painting onto it. Okay, a little bit more paint. And again, you know, at some points you might want a little bit thicker, then a little bit smaller, just like you would like a cloud. So I have a little sharp edge here, and then maybe it's a little rougher down that area, and that'll start giving a little bit of pop. And again, kind of when you're painting that, kind of go with the flow of how you see the foam going. Like, you know, the foam is crashing this way, so when I'm painting, I'm doing it like this, just like the foam was actually going that way. And you don't want it too uniform. You know, like we've got a little bit of thick edge here and a little bit of thin edge here. You know, then you can go a little bit thicker down in this area maybe, and just leave it alone. You don't want to carry that through. Maybe I'll leave this blank and bring a little bit more down on there. And then maybe a little bit more white over here to bring this edge down. And again, just kind of going along with the flow. Okay, now let's take our big brush again. And now we're going to knock that back even more. Now again, when the wave is going this way and you have your foam in a circular motion, okay, as long as you're keeping that circular motion, whether you're going this way or I'm going back that way, I'm still smoothing it in that one motion. So I might come in and hit it like this, which is still giving me that small motion, and then come back in and grab some of the top part this way. As long as it's all in that circular billowing motion going across. And you don't want to hit it too much. You don't want too much foam going all over. So I'm just hitting it real light. I mean real light. And what that does is it just smooths it out enough, but I'm not losing my detail that way. Now you can see it's starting to look like actual foam. Now what we want to do for this part here is we want like the water breaking, and on the edge of that break is foam at the end. And now I'm going to grab some of that white and some of that liquid, and I want just a tip on there. I don't want much going on anything except just for the tip of that rat brush. And I'm just going to dab right along this edge here. Just like that. So if you take your fan brush and now go in that same direction that you're seeing the wave go. Right now we're seeing this wave breaking that way, this wave breaking this way. So then just grab that and just pull it right across like that. The same one over here. Not real heavy, just a little bit. Now you're seeing where it's knocking it back. And then we come back in with the big brush again, because we've got it where it's streaking out here. Okay, grab it, and we're just going to use the small tip of this brush, but we're just going to smooth that out a little bit, right on the end. Not where it grabbed across on top, but right at the end there. Okay. Just like that. So now we've got streaks of that water breaking, and we've got the foam going over here. You can even take your fan brush or something like this, clean it off, get a little liquid, put some white paint on it, and instead of just dabbing at it like we did the other one, I'll show you another way you can do this. Either way works. Come up here with that and just grab that lightly and just go right along how you see it coming down. And again, clean it off, grab a little bit more paint. Do the same thing again. You're going to grab it from the surface here and just pull it right across. But again. Okay, then we're going to take our smoothing brush. Now you can see where when you're doing that, sometimes you grab into that foam and you're getting streaks across the foam like you can see here. Just grab your smoothing brush again and just knock that back. Again, you're just going in the same general motion. You got that billow going. So you want to just hit that edge. And I'm just touching it with this end over here. Just grab that end and just knock that right back. Grab your rat brush, grab some liquid, and grab the darker side first. We can always highlight it. And we're just going to come in right down in here, just where there was a foam part coming in. I just want to grab it. And again, getting that little, all that little sprinkle that's coming up here is great, because when we knock it back, it's going to look like real foam. When it actually hits the water, it does splash out. And that's what we're getting. That's why these brushes are so good for this. We want to just get it. Just with a line going here. Now we can taper off to nothing at the end over here, and then get a little bit thicker. Just like that. Then again, take your big brush and you want to knock this back. And you just want to lightly touch that. That's all, just to give it that soft foam, because foam is very soft when you look at it. And this brush softens off every little brush stroke you're putting down, so it makes it look incredibly realistic that way. Okay, so the last step we need is to grab a little bit of white paint and grab some of this lemon yellow. And mix that together. And a nice bright yellow on here. Maybe a little bit more color. Pop it. All right. Then grab your 3/4 inch brush. Grab a little liquid. Not too much, just a little bit. And now we're going to come into here, make this a real thin part of the wave. So we have a blue to green, and right where it's really thin, the sun's shining through, we're going to have some yellow in here. So we grab some of that right up at the top there. And just start blending that in. Just work your way right down to the blue, just like we did with the white part here into the blue. Same sort of thing. We're just going to work our way right down. Now if you need a little bit more, clean off your brush. A little bit more liquid maybe. just work your way right down the painting. And now we'll take our big 3-inch brush and we'll just blend that right down smooth like the rest of it. Again, try not to get outside of that edge. We're just smoothing it down this way here and try not to get too much of that foam. If you have a little dark edge with some of this blue is between the white and that yellow, it's actually a good thing, so don't worry about that. We're just blending that yellow right down into this wave here. And just grab some of that, and again, I'm just grabbing the very end of this and just start pushing it right in. There we go. Now we got light shining through a wave. All right. And tomorrow what we'll do is we'll lay in some foam on top of here and some foam down here down to the beach area and maybe a couple of seagulls up here and hit some foam, some spray coming out the back and start putting a little bit of life to this painting. So anyhow, that's it for today, and I hope you had fun, and we'll see you tomorrow.